Welcome to another episode of HR Leaders Live, the show where we discuss the future of work with today's most innovative and successful people leaders. I was really excited to have Alan on the show. I remember one night sitting at home and I was on Amazon looking at the bestsellers list and looking at all of the people that I would love to have on the show. And I dropped you a message on LinkedIn, right, Alan?
You sure did.
Saying, would you be interested in coming on the show? A lot of times never expecting anyone's going to reply, but you did. And here we are. So thank you so much for joining, Alan. Before we jump in, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your background and journey to where we are today.
Most certainly. And if you remember, one of the cool things was when you dropped me that email earlier that morning, I had just got done speaking to a few hundred HR professionals at an event here in the US run by SHRM. And that's why it was just kind of crazy that I just got done speaking to that group. And then your email comes in and then we connected. So fate has its way. I think for the best way to describe me is basketball was my first identifiable passion. And I fell in love with the game of basketball when I was 4 or 5 years old. And here 4 decades later, it's still a major staple of my life. I played all the way up through college and then started to develop an equal affinity for performance training and getting players bigger, faster, stronger, so they can improve on the court. And that's where I spent most of my professional career, working with elite youth high school and college basketball players, and had an opportunity to work with some really, really big name players. And I learned
you can throw some name jobs. You
may even be able to see some of the pictures in my background. You know, I was able to work with guys like Kevin Durant when he was in high school. And then I got some contracting work with Nike and Jordan Brand, which allowed me to work events for Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Steve Nash, Kyrie Irving.
Amazing.
So I've had a chance to be around, work alongside, and learn from the best players in the game. And as I matured and started gaining more experience, I started to have an equal fascination with their ability to lead, their ability to create cohesive units and teams, their ability to create culture. And as I became more infatuated and fascinated with that, a few years ago, I decided to make the leap over to the corporate space and kind of left the basketball world. And I'm now taking all of those lessons and mindsets and habits, and I'm teaching businesses how to incorporate those same strategies so that they can become more high functioning teams. And, you know, I work with executive teams and leaders. I work with sales professionals, but I found a nice sweet home with the folks in the HR world because I know the HR folks are usually the unsung heroes of every business, that they don't quite get the praise and the accolades that they deserve, because they are the glue that holds everything else together. And they're so responsible for the culture of an organization that, boy, I really love working with folks in HR. So that was why when you reached out, man, I hit you right back.
Amazing. Well, I love when these things just come together and you never know where these conversations are going to go. And if you don't ask or don't reach out, it's never going to happen. That's why I love doing it. Not everyone replies, but if you don't make the effort, you don't know, right?
Well, there's one that Wayne Gretzky, the hockey superstar, says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah, and there's no reason not to reach out. So no, and this worked out being a great fit. So I'm so thankful you did.
Fantastic. When was the point that came when you decided to write the book? So your book is, for everyone who's listening, is called Raise Your Game.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to write that?
So the book came out this past January, but I decided about a year and a half before that it was time to do a book. And I think I've probably known for over a decade now that I've wanted to write a book. You know, there have been so many books and so many authors that have had a very profound impact on my life and my perspective. So the thought of me being able to write something based on my journey that may be able to add value to someone was kind of a legacy bucket item, if you will. So that part was important to me. And it took just about a year from putting pen to paper to actually having a published book. So, and it was a wonderful process, and really, really enjoyed it thoroughly. And now I'm enjoying the challenge of getting the book in as many hands as possible. As you guys know, we live in a very noisy climate. You know, there's things vying for our attention. We're all bombarded by ads and distractions. And, you know, since we hit go live on this thing, you know, probably a dozen books have been published. So with so much stuff going on in the world, it's really hard to cut through that clutter. But I'm enjoying that challenge, and that's the way that I view it.
Yeah. So who's the book for? Who's your audience? Why should we read it? Who should pick it up?
The book is for anyone on a macro level that's looking to improve their own performance and become the best versions of themselves. And I don't believe in compartmentalizing between work and home. I believe that if you sharpen your sword and you work on skill sets to help you become the best version of yourself, that it has such high utility that will help you in any area of your life. So when you work on improving your leadership for work, it will also make you a better mother or father. It'll also make you a better spouse. So on a very macro level, it's for anyone that wants to become the best version of themselves. But then I also want to make sure that people use those skills and become the best version of themselves so that they can serve others and be a part of a team and be a part of something bigger than themselves. So it's one thing to have the skill sets and the tools. It's another one to use them not only for yourself, but can you make your organization or your team better? And so the book was written very deliberately for anyone that wants self-improvement, but anyone that wants team improvement as well.
Yeah, and I completely agree with everything you said as well. And I love the fact that you're bringing over your background and experience from the sports side over into business. One of the things that I did that made my sales team in previous companies and this company very successful is I hired a lot of former athletes into our team, and they were killers, both on the phone, but also in leadership roles, because they'd led teams, whether it's basketball, ice hockey, all the different sports that we played growing up. And I've also think that myself and Shane, we played ice hockey growing up. We also played for the basketball team. A lot of the skills that we learned and in sports it helped us really transition and do really well in business. So we weren't even aware, by the way,
for sure,
of those. Sales was, making sure, when everyone else around us was getting a no and failing and leaving the company, we were like, this is normal. We don't win every single basketball game or ice hockey game.
Right.
Like, failure is part of the process. You just got to move forward, and and like anything, we took it the same way we trained every single week. For us, the relevant sport, we were like, we need to sharpen our toolbox here in sales and educate ourselves on how to sell and dive straight into that. And I remember my sales manager put on the board, the more you learn, the more you earn.
Yeah, I like
and
that.
I took that so serious. I was like, it's like the same with any of the sports. The more I trained, the better I got. And I was like, if I can apply the same thing, the principles that I did in sports into business, then I'm going to be successful. And it really, really worked.
No, most certainly. And what I find neat is, even for anyone listening to this that didn't play sports or doesn't have an equal love or affinity for sports, if you did theater, or you were on the debate team, or you were in the computer club, or music, you played a musical instrument, all of these things, what they share, and that's the thing is, even though my background comes from sports, I worked really hard and was very deliberate about writing a book that you don't have to love sports to benefit from it. It's really it's the mindset. It's understand how important rituals and routines are. It's understanding that you have to respect the process. It's what you just said perfectly, that no matter how accomplished you become, that you never feel like you've arrived and that you're finished, that you're always going to be a work in progress. So, now as a father of 3 young kids, they're trying everything under the sun. They're playing some sports. They're doing a variety of different activities, and all of this stuff. Again, I keep saying the same phrase because I believe it has very high utility. So regardless of whether or not someone has the same appreciation for sport that you and I have, the principles are what's most important. Basketball was always just the platform. That was my canvas. But the real purpose of my work was to create change, to empower people, to equip them with the skills to be the versions of themselves. So anyone listening to this, if sport wasn't your canvas, I'm pretty sure you painted on something else. And now we can all get together and look at these principles and strategies and all use them for our benefit.
Yeah, I always tell this story. I say always. I tell it to my close friends, but I'll share it with you guys. That my first moment when I realized that I could do anything I wanted as long as I was willing to work hard and fail forward and make sure that that continuous growth mindset was when I was in school, and I got bullied in school, right? And I had this plan. I was like, how am I not going to get bullied anymore? And I was like, the biggest bullies play for the basketball team. So if I get really good at basketball, everyone's going to leave me alone. And before that point, I'd never played a sport before. And I asked my mum, I said, Mum, please buy me a basketball net. And I spent the entire summer holidays teaching myself how to play basketball. I was terrible, like awful. I spent the entire summer holidays playing every single day. I literally just from morning, as soon as I woke up, went outside and played basketball the whole time. By the time I got back to school and I went into the changing room, people were like, what the hell is Chris doing in here? Why are you in here? Why are you trying out for the basketball team? And I actually became one of the best players on the team. I got into the team, became one of the best players in school, and we won the league. And then from that moment onwards, everything I approached, I was like, I can do anything now.
For sure.
Whether it was sales, whether it was any sport, to be honest, business, whatever it was, I was like, as long as I was willing to put the work in and invest in myself and my own learning, I could do anything. And that from that moment, that really changed things for me.
It's it's such an empowering feeling. And I look at it from a three-pronged approach. Certainly you absolutely have to work hard and you have to be willing to put in the effort. But it's equally important to work smart, to make sure you're being as efficient as you can. And then the third pillar, which people often forget, you have to do those two things consistently. So you have to work hard, you have to work smart, and you have to work consistent. And you really need all three if you want to be elite in whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, if you work hard and you work smart, but you only do so when you feel like it, you're probably going to have a ceiling on how high you'll go. If you work hard and you do it consistently, but you're not working smart, you're basically climbing the ladder to the wrong wall. Well, you're not going to make it. And then clearly, if you choose not to even put forth the effort, it doesn't matter how smart or consistent you are, you're not going to be able to survive or at least thrive. Yeah. So it's those three pillars that are vital. And, those are the ones where I'm constantly checking myself to make sure that I'm in a good groove. And, from an effort standpoint, if working hard is a choice, then that means by default, not working hard is also a choice. You can't have it both ways. And what happens with most people when they choose not to work hard, they choose to hide behind some type of excuse. I wasn't feeling well. I was hungry. I didn't sleep last night. And while those might be legitimate reasons, if you hide behind those too often, you're simply not going to be the best version of yourself. So to me, that triple alignment of working hard, smart, and consistent is what we need to each do as individuals. But then we also have to have the courage and love and grace and compassion to hold our teammates accountable so that they're doing the same thing. And that's how you create a winning culture in an unbeatable team.
Amazing. And if you tell yourself that, what I've realized, the more you tell yourself you can't do those things or you make the excuse, that becomes in itself a habit.
It's so cool because to me, as I get older, my goal is to simplify things as much as possible. I think most people in general make life way too complicated. And I love coming up with binary questions to ask myself because it's black or white. It's either yes or no. And that's the way my brain functions at its best. So every single one of us has that little voice inside of us that's going to be the naysayer, that's going to say, you can't do this. You're not good enough. Why are you even trying? Play it safe. Don't quit your job. Why would you start that new company? You're a fool. But the binary question we have is whether or not we listen to that voice. And that's where we get to make the choice. It's almost impossible to drown that voice out. At some point, no matter how accomplished and confident you are, there's always going to be a little bit of self-doubt. There's always going to be a little bit of that voice. But as you just so brilliantly put, you can make the decision not to listen to it. And you can make the decision to make the more positive voice louder so that it drowns it out. And I think the more things we can approach in this binary fashion, the better off we'll be. I mean, I was writing a blog this morning. I haven't posted it yet, but I mean, if you really want to simplify life, just think that every single decision you're going to make, it could be something very trivial, like what am I going to eat for lunch? Or it could be something monumental, like should I switch jobs? But every question you just have to ask yourself, is doing this thing going to take me closer to being the best version of myself? Or is it going to take me further away? And it's almost comical when you make it that simple. But then the key is, because none of us are perfect and no one's batting 1,000, no one always picks what's going to make them the best version of themselves. But the more we can choose that, the better off we'll be. So is eating this healthy meal right now, is this taking me closer to who I want to be? Well, I envision myself being a healthy and fit human being, mentally, physically, and emotionally. So yes, eating this meal will take me closer to being that person. And if we can line that up and make most of our decisions favorable, then things turn out better. I mean, ultimately, every one of us right now, every person listening to this is an accumulation of every decision you've ever made. And people that tend to make better decisions more consistently tend to lead better, happier, more fulfilled, and significant lives.
I love the 5 questions that you sent over about how do you become the best version of yourself. And you have you said you got the 5 questions that you ask yourself?
Well, the neat part about those questions is it's a great starting point for someone to literally sit down and take some time to really reflect and come up on a macro level what your answers are. But then, as you just said so insightfully, it's almost a recalibration every day. It's something we have to ask ourselves. And, every word in the English language is going to have some type of connotation, and it makes people feel a certain way, the way they interpret it. And sacrifice doesn't necessarily mean a punishment or a bad thing. When we go back to this binary choice, we all understand this intuitively, but sometimes it doesn't register. Anytime you say yes to something, you're technically saying no to something else. Right now I'm saying yes to being on your show and being fully engaged and present with you, which means I'm saying no to everything else that I could be doing during this hour. And then the question is that a sacrifice that I'm willing to make? Is that the best use of my time at this moment? Is doing this taking me closer to who I want to be? And of course, the answer to all of those is yes, which is why I'm with you right now and thankful to be connected and thankful to have this opportunity to share. But that's the way that we need to look at it, because anytime you're going to say yes to something, you will be saying no to something else. And as long as we own that and we're willing to make those sacrifices, then we move on to the second question and so forth. But that's just the way that the key is. If we can live in the present moment, the world will slow down. And then when the world slows down, I believe all of us can exercise better judgment and make better decisions with what we're doing. It's when we get all ramped up and we get distracted by the past, we get anxious by the future, we tend to default to making excuses and complaining, and we just create this storm where we all feel chaos and we feel out of control. And the key is just slowing down, taking a breath, taking a step back, and looking at as many of these different things through that binary lens as possible. And life becomes so much simpler.
It really is just a simple act of sitting down before saying yes, but asking yourself those questions. And that will then dictate the answer.
Yeah.
And I found it harder. And as our company's growing now, and as the podcast and our social presence is growing, I'm getting so many emails through LinkedIn, emails and messages through LinkedIn of people asking various different things. And I got into a habit a few months ago. I was just saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
And also sometimes I didn't want to be rude. They're subscribers. They're people that support the show, and I kind of feel obligated to help out, right? And the same way that you're helping me and everyone else helps, I want to give as much back. But I realized at some point that it was stopping me from actually my core objectives of getting where I needed to be personally.
Yes.
So I had to have that conversation with myself and say, Chris, you can't keep taking every call. You can't keep replying to every single message. It's not sustainable in order to grow a company at the same time as well.
Yeah.
So
and that's a perfect example of making that sacrifice. And one thing I want to make very crystal clear to anyone watching or listening right now, I'm very well aware of the fact that everything I'm saying right now, I'm delivering in a very matter-of-fact tone, because these principles are in fact basic, but none of this stuff is easy. I want to make sure everyone knows that basic and easy are not synonyms. They're not the same thing. That to be able to be present and step back and view everything through a binary lens, yes, that is a basic concept. It's one my 3 children understand. But trust me, doing that is anything but easy. These are the biggest challenges we all face. So I don't want anyone listening to this.
No, it's not easy at all.
Thinking, oh, that's all I have to do. I'm glad I listened to this podcast because tomorrow morning my life's going to become exponentially easier and better. No, these things take work. They take conditioning. They take consistently making the right choice. But then when you do make the wrong decision, acknowledging it, learning from it, and then being able to use that information to make a better decision the next time. I can't stress enough that we're not looking for perfection as individuals or as teams. We're looking for progress. I'm a firm believer that the trajectory at which we're going is way more important than where we are now. So anyone listening to this, it doesn't matter where you are in your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, where you are is not near as important to making sure you're creating the mindset and the habits to be getting better and to be going in the right direction. So please give yourself some grace and compassion if you find yourself at present and you're not happy with where you are or you're not happy with where your team is. Let's get everything in alignment so that tomorrow will be a little bit better. The day after that will be a little bit better. And then once we start to build some momentum, things will get a lot better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you've just touched on some really good points there. It only gets better. It only gets easier as you build momentum. And you can't be, and it's hard to be motivated. You can't be motivated from day one. As you build momentum, the motivation comes with that, because you start seeing the change. And like any habit, the only way to do it is repetition. Suggestions for staying positive and motivated.
One of the most important parts is the environment that you have. If you intentionally surround yourself and insulate yourself with people that are also positive and optimistic, but people that truly love you and care enough about you that they want to see you achieve this, or they want to see you improve, or want to see you happy, your environment is crucial when it comes to creating any habit. So if you have just a couple of people that are going to be negative, and a couple of people that say, Jane, why are you doing this? You can't do this. Why are you trying to eat healthy? Why are you trying to read more? Why are you trying? It just makes it like you're trying to run a race and you're wearing a weight vest. So environment is everything. So not only is the internal self-talk important, but who we surround ourselves with. And this can be a huge challenge, because many times the people closest to us
I was about to say that.
the negative ones. And you have to be willing to make that decision. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but you can run that through the same filter. I can say, is my friendship with Chris, does that take me closer to being who I want to be, or further away? Well, if Chris is always negative and always pessimistic and always complaining and always making excuses, then in theory, Chris is not helping me get where I want to go or be who I want to be. And I'm not saying you have to cut these people completely out of your life, but you need to make a firm decision how much time you either spend with them or waste with them, because that's the way you have to look at it. So spend more time with the people that are helping you become the person you want to be.
You talk about the 6 pillars to leading yourself. Let's just talk with the ones that's really underrated, but we're going to go into active listening.
You being such a high acumen sales professional know how important listening is.
Number one.
Yeah, I mean, listening is important, really in any relationship. And let's be quite honest. No matter who's listening to this right now, I don't know what your specific industry is, but you are in the relationship business, because we're always going to work with human beings, and we're always going to serve and sell to human beings. So any business is always going to be relationship driven. Even if you sell a product, you're still selling it to human beings. And one of the most important characteristics of being an effective leader, of being an impactful teammate, of being a great sales professional, is the ability to actively listen. And there's a few reasons for that. One, the gold is in the listening. That's you're going to get the best information from either your teammate or from the prospect based on what they're saying. But more important than that, when you take the time to listen to someone, you're sending them an unconscious message that you care about them, that you value them, that you believe in them. And that unconscious message is a glue that will strengthen any human connection. And anytime we come in contact with another human being, we have an opportunity to either strengthen a connection, or we have the opportunity to erode the connection. And we want to make sure we're doing everything in our power to strengthen as many connections as possible. So whether you're selling a product or you're just selling an idea, if you're in HR, you are selling a set of beliefs and values. You are selling a culture. There's things that you are selling every single day. And, the old adage, telling is not selling, is
I love that one.
Yeah. I mean,
I was saying this to my team only yesterday. I wish she was in the show. Yeah, I was like, guys, you're doing way too much talking right now. I was like, you're just telling everyone, not selling. They don't need to hear every single feature and benefit of our products when you have no idea what their challenges and needs are. And they're like, oh God, it's tough. But I love the 3 keys to active listening that you give. Do you mind if I read them out as well to everyone?
Awesome.
So, because I really took a lot away from them. So the first one you listed was the best response is often to ask an insightful follow-up question.
Yes.
That shows that you were actually listening in the first place, which many people don't do. They immediately jump in with their response, or what, as opposed to actually just asking that follow-up question, which is so important. The second one you put was list.
Yep.
So at an appropriate point in the conversation, break the conversation and list back their words, what they said, so that you can show that you are actually listening in the conversation and engage. And then last, you put empathy. So you do your best to listen with a compassionate ear and put yourself in their shoes as well, which I think is so, so important.
Let's take that. Let's put it in a real world example. So Jane from HR has somebody coming in from her team and says, hey, I'm really irritated with Chris. I've got a problem with Chris. And now Jane can actually go through those 3 steps. So she should be able to ask a series of insightful questions. What is it that Chris—
Open questions, by the way, guys. Open questions,
exactly.
just to make sure.
Can you clarify what Chris is doing that's bothering you? Can you clarify why that's bothering you? Do you think that that's the real issue? Is there something underlining? Is there anything that you've done that might be contributing to this? Have you talked to Chris? I mean, the list of questions you could ask are infinite. Then, regardless of what that person's response is, you want to make sure that you have the correct information. So then you would say something to the effect of, Jane, if I hear you— oh no, Jane was the HR director. Sorry. So-and-so, if I hear you correctly, you said that it bothers you when Chris does this, this, and this. And you mentioned that you had talked to him, but he didn't give you the right response. And you list back what they said. And then lastly is when you throw in the empathy and you say to yourself, you know what, I've had issues and disagreements with colleagues in the past. I know how troubling that can be. I can only imagine how frustrated you are right now. And you try to put yourself in their shoes. And if you ask right questions and the questions are based on the information they're giving you, you list it back so that you 100% know that you have the correct information and that that person knows you've been listening. And then regardless of what it is that they're sharing, even if it's not a big deal to you, you have to appreciate and have the empathy to know it's a big deal to them. And that means it's important. And if you can do those 3 things, you'd be hard pressed not to leave that meeting in a more productive state. I'm not saying you'll resolve everything. I'm not saying you're going to fix it. I'm not saying that person's going to, skip out of there with a huge smile. But if you do those 3 things, there's no reason that you won't be closer to a resolution when they leave.
Can I choose another one? Can I pick on you again in one of these
Anything
areas?
you want. I'm here to serve you, man. Anything.
Let's talk about performance gaps.
Yes, that's one of the biggest ones, and that is the gap between what we know we're supposed to do and what we actually do. And every single one of us, myself very much included, will always have a gap between what we know and what we do. And key to performance is learning how to minimize those gaps, to close and narrow those gaps, especially in the most impactful and important areas of our life. The example I always use, I don't know who's listening to this, but I know you have listeners from all around the world. Everyone listening to this knows what healthy foods are, knows how much sleep they're supposed to get, and knows that they should be doing some type of physical fitness workout program, each week. Everyone knows that. But how many people are actually doing that? How many people consistently eat healthy food? How many people consistently get the adequate sleep and sound sleep? And then how many people do work out consistently? I mean, the statistics are staggering. Most people are not doing those things. And it's not because they don't know. It's because they don't do. And that's what we need.
Seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's not the lack of knowledge,
no,
which is hindering you most of the time. And that it sounds so obvious, but when you think about it, I'm the same. I always I have trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
And I know that I am my own culprit. Like, I know the fact that I'm eating just before I go to sleep is I'm not gonna have a good night's sleep. I know that if I sit in front of my computer doing work, that the sheer fact of me sitting in front of that computer with the blue light and all of the information stimulating my brain, that I'm gonna have trouble sleeping. I know all of these things as well, but I still do them, and I still complain when I wake up the next day that I had a bad night's sleep.
It takes the awareness to recognize it, and then put some systems and processes and habits and behaviors in place, and then slowly over time keep course correcting those. But these performance gaps, I have the humility to know that not a single thing that you and I have discussed so far, like everyone already knows the stuff we've said. They either know it intellectually or intuitively. I don't think you and I have said anything right now that has blown someone's mind. I don't think there's anyone that's going,
no.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, the key is there's a lot of people listening right now that aren't doing the things that they already know. How many times you go to a conference or you listen to a podcast and you take a ton of notes and you're like, yeah, man, oh yeah. And then you go home and you just put those notes in a file cabinet and you don't do anything different. And that's where we need to realize that old adage that knowledge is power is incomplete. It's the application.
It's not true. It's the application.
Yeah, that's all that matters. So, right now, I mean, people say, they say all the time, like, if I read your book, am I going to be able to perform at a higher level? And I go, no, not just by reading it. Now, if you
You'll
read
know
it,
how
if you
to,
read
but
it
you
and you
won't.
apply it, then yes, I do believe that will improve your performance. But it's the action that all of us need, and that's what we need to inch closer towards. I have the full humility to know that, and this is going to sound crazy, if I didn't learn another new thing for 1 year, 365 days, I didn't add a single new nugget to my head, but all I did was everything that I currently know, you would see my performance go through the roof. That's how much all of us are leaving on the table. That's how much all of us have a gap between what we know we're supposed to do and what we actually do. And where I'm pleased is my performance gaps in most areas of my life are narrower today than they were a year ago. And I can promise you they'll be even narrower a year from now, but far from perfect. And I still have gaps, and I still make some decisions that I probably could make a better decision, but they're becoming less frequent and they're becoming, less often. So to me, that's the key, is identifying these performance gaps, putting systems and processes and habits in place to help narrow them. And then we guarantee that trajectory that we talked about earlier is going in the right direction.
Yeah. That's a massive point, by the way, for everyone listening, and something I've been trying to do more and more of, because every single day I listen to podcasts on to and from work, and I'm always learning something new. And I realized that I was spending so much time consuming content that I didn't have any time. I didn't leave any time for the actual execution of it.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what we discussed before, the only way to execute on it is by repeating it.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over again, and actually doing it. And I have so much knowledge, from all the different podcasts. I'm obsessed with learning and listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, etc. But I just don't spend enough time implementing.
Yes.
Yeah. And you are completely right.
And most people, they're, and I applaud that. I love people that want to keep being voracious readers and listening to podcasts and doing. I mean, I think that is a great quality to have. But ultimately, when people just keep adding tools to their toolbox, all you're doing now is lugging around a heavier toolbox. The key is being able to use the tools in the toolbox. I mean, I don't have very many handyman skills. I'm not much of a carpenter or mechanic, but I mean, how many hammers do you need? Probably not that many hammers. So why do you keep focusing on adding hammers to your toolbox and you just have to carry that thing around? Let's use what we actually have. And that's why, as I get older, as I mentioned, I'm trying to simplify my life. I'm trying to say, all right, what are the 4 or 5 best tools for me to use, and how can I use those as often as possible to narrow these performance gaps and improve my performance? And that's ultimately what mastering the basics is all about. You don't need to, if you want to be a really good basketball player, you don't need 72 different offensive moves. If you have 2 or 3 pretty solid moves, and each of those has a counter, so if the defense takes away the move you were trying to do, you have a counter move, you can be one of the world's best players and only have a very small handful of moves. So it's not about trying to master everything. It's about trying to take a handful of things and mastering those and getting really, really elite. But I just want to make sure that this performance gap concept is one of the most important ones for us to stay focused on.
Yeah. And I actually took that, because I've been thinking about this recently, and changed our products to also help in that way. I'll give you an example. So my previous events that I used to run, we used to think more, the more we have, the more value.
Yeah.
So we used to have 60 speakers across 2 days, 60 speakers at our conference, 7 streams of content, right? And over 1,000 HR directors.
Wow.
Right now, based on what we discussed, I have 30 people attending our workshop, 6 speakers, and over 80% of the day is focused on execution.
Yeah. Less is more.
And it is so much more valuable for our members. And when they walk away, everyone has a clear blueprint of not what they've learned, but actually a blueprint of the execution plan of how they're going to take the learners and implement it.
That's so important.
And so I actually have people look at our program. Oh, you've only got 6 speakers, Chris, because they're used to these big conferences with, like 50 speakers. I'm like, that's by design.
Yeah.
And oh, you've only got 30 people coming. I'm like, yes, but they're 30 of the right people.
Right.
They're 30 senior HR executives that bring experience to the table.
It's cool.
So it's funny you say that, but I've changed the model to match what we've just discussed, to make sure the focus is on implementation, execution, and results, as opposed to just putting more and more and more into the product.
For sure.
As possible.
And that's why I mean, you and I have so many similar perspectives and philosophies, and we jive so well because, as a professional speaker, a lot of people refer to me as a motivational speaker, and I understand where they're coming from because there's not really a lot of titles that fit, but that's not really what I do. I'm not there to motivate anyone. You know, I take a lot of pride in being a fairly good storyteller, and I do have some lessons and some stats. But what I tell folks, the most important thing is I'm going to give you some tangible, actionable, and practical takeaways that you and your team can implement immediately to start seeing some change. And that's, to me, that's what it is. It's about giving them the tools. But as you just said, and I love the word blueprint, let me give you a blueprint of how you can actually put these things into place. And that's what's most important. You know, I actually have a 3-step strategy, and I'll give that to your listeners really quick.
By the way, that was my next step,
on how you
going
can
into the
close
execution.
performance. And, you know, there's a 3-step. Now, once again, these 3 steps are very basic, but they're not easy to implement. And the first step is to just pick one thing. You know, we all have a myriad of things that we want to try to change. And most of us as high performers and high achievers, we can get rather impatient, and we want to change a lot of things at once, and we want to have everything done by tomorrow. But if you can have the patience to only pick one thing to focus on and put all of your focus and energy and time into that one thing, you'll see a much higher return. The second is you need to be able to make the commitment to know that you're going to need a certain amount of reps before anything starts to change. And while there are a variety of different studies that have been done, generally speaking, if you do something daily for a little over 2 months, they say around 66 days, you'll start to see that you've grooved that new pattern and behavior. So you're going to pick one thing. You're going to be very committed to yourself to doing it every day for 66 days. And then the third piece is you're going to keep that spotlight on, and you're going to insulate yourself with an inner circle of people that are going to hold you accountable to doing that one thing for around 66 days. So in kind of summary, figure out where you have a performance gap. You know, maybe it is health and fitness. Maybe it's in your marriage. Maybe it's in your leadership, whatever it is, but figure out, where do you see the biggest gap between what you know and what you do? And then decide on one behavior, either something new you're going to start or something you've been doing that you need to stop because you've been getting in your own way. And whichever you think is most impactful, just pick that one. And then get a calendar and a big red Sharpie and decide that you're not going to stop until you have 66 big red X's in a row that you've either done this thing or stopped doing this thing, whichever one you choose. And then insulate yourself with people that are going to hold you accountable and check in with you every day and ask how you're doing. And if you can do those 3 things, you have a very, very, very good chance that you're going to narrow that performance gap. And once again, that's so basic. I mean, I just spelled it out.
So basic,
but
it's not hard. It's not easy to do.
Gosh, no. If anyone thinks that, tomorrow is going to be, it doesn't work that way, but the plan is there. And that's an example. And I've had so many people reach out to me a couple months after a workshop or a keynote or a training and say, hey man, I took your advice. I did the one thing. Here's what I've been doing. And here I am. I've made this small improvement. And I'm like, that's outstanding. Now pick something else. So we're always works in progress. This is not a one and done where I'm going to pick this one thing, and once I fix that, I've arrived and I'm done. No, this is what this habit I'm going to focus on for the next couple of months. And then I'm going to find another one and then another one. And we're always in this process of closing performance gaps. But that's an example of something tangible, a blueprint of a strategy that I want people to implement.
Fantastic. And also it comes to the point where you do it for so much, it becomes a habit, and then you're not even consciously having to think about it. And I love one of the things that you mentioned as well, I think it's in the book, where you say that, you know, studies show that 45% of your daily actions are just pure unconscious, just pure habit.
That's half of everything we do from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed is on autopilot. So clearly we want as many.
That's the power, right? Exactly.
Yeah. If half of everything you do every day is an incredibly positive habit, and then the other half where you're consciously thinking, you're making better decisions, boy, now you are absolutely on an upward trajectory and will keep getting better. The problem is when people have a good portion of their habits are self-defeating and negative and are taking them in the wrong direction, then it doesn't matter how many good decisions you make. Half of everything you're doing every day is causing your boat to sink. So yeah, you can make good decisions for the other half and you end up about even at the end of the day. So we need everything in alignment, everything swimming in the right direction.
Yeah, I want to say one thing though, because
Sure.
if you drop off one of those days, guys, don't give up.
Oh, of course
I
not.
see so many people, they may have that cheat day and end up eating something they shouldn't if they're on a, if they're trying to get healthier. Don't give up, because I see so many people do that and they go, oh, well, I might as well stop now because I failed that day and didn't stick through. That will happen.
Yes, it happens to happen.
And, yeah, 100%. So I want to, because everyone thinks it's like, all rosy. It's not. It's you're gonna have those tough days where you don't do these things.
Yep.
But don't give up. Keep going.
And that's where, as we talked about earlier, that little voice will come in, because that little voice will come in and say, see, I told you couldn't do this. See, you're not good enough to do this. And you choose whether or not to listen. You choose whether or not to say, you know what? You're right. I did step out of bounds today. I didn't make the best decision possible, but tomorrow's a new day and I'm not going to mess up 2 days in a row. Tomorrow I'm going to get back on track and I'm going to start a new streak. And if you can have that type of approach, and that's the thing, we all have to learn to give ourselves more compassion. Most of us as high performers and high achievers, we're so self-critical and we're so hard on ourselves. We need to learn to have the same compassion we would have as a friend. If you told me, Chris, that you were trying to change something and in the second week you fell off one day, I'm not going to beat you up over that. I'm going to put my arm around you and say, hey man, it's all right. I'm glad you acknowledge it. I'm glad you learned from it. Tomorrow's a new day. You got this, buddy. And we need to be able to do the same thing with ourselves.
Yeah. And again, the reality of learning anything new, which you essentially are, you're going to fail a lot. and that's normal. I actually hate the word failure. I'm gonna need to rebrand what the word failure means, because for me, is in many cases it's positive, because it means I'm challenging myself, I'm pushing to grow, I'm trying new things. So I'm like, failure is great as long as I'm learning from it. I just want to be clear on that.
Well, and that's one
as long as I'm learning from it, progressing.
Well, you hit it perfectly, and this might be one of the last points that we cover, because I want to be very respectful of everyone's time. But every single thing we do, whether we succeed or whether we fail in that moment, is going to give us some type of feedback. The feedback might be, hey, for me to try to do this ollie kick on my skateboard, I need to move my foot a little bit to the left. The feedback could be one you get from a meeting you have with your team, but everything gives us feedback, and we choose what to do with that feedback. So when something happens that at the moment is considered a failure, well, you have the information in front of you, and now you decide what to do with it. And if you choose to learn from it, acknowledge that you could have done something better, figure out a way to course correct the next rep or the next time, then failure it's what you just said. It's a learning opportunity. It's a stepping stone, and we should embrace it. So really, the more reps we can get in everything we do, the more feedback we'll get. And the more feedback we get, the more opportunity we have to get better. So that's why we should all be out trying to do as much stuff and get as involved as possible, because they're all just opportunities to learn. And if you look at the failure as permanent, or you look at it in a way that it rattles your confidence, well, then it's actually going to send you in the wrong direction. So just know that no matter what you're doing, whether you're meeting with your team, whether you're making a sales call, or you're trying a new skateboard trick, you're gonna mess up a good portion of the time. And that's part of the process. And when you can learn to embrace that and actually appreciate that,
it's really exciting.
It's so exciting, and it's very empowering, because you don't feel dejected by failure. You go, oh, that's what I did wrong. I can't wait to try it again and do it the right way.
The last thing I want to jump in before I let you go, I know we've been on for a while, is living present.
Yes.
And can you talk about that and share your thoughts on that? Because I think that's really important.
I'm glad you teed that up, because that's kind of the bow tie to put our entire conversation, put a nice bow tie on it. And that's to learn how to be in the present moment as often as possible.
Yep.
I alluded to earlier that it's very easy for any of us to get distracted by the past. And the past is not necessarily years ago. The past is 5 minutes ago. The past is 5 hours ago. And it's equally easy for us to get really anxious about the future. What's going to happen later today? What's going to happen next month or next year? And while we do want to learn from the past, and we do want to be prepared for the future, we can't live in either one of those spaces. We need to focus on the present moment. And when you are focused on the present moment, the here and now, it does allow the world to slow down. It allows you to not be so reactive and responsive, but allows you to make good decisions, run them all through that binary filter, because you're basically saying, to be where your feet are. And that's the short definition of living in the present moment, is to be where your feet are. Wherever your feet are, make sure that's where your head and your heart are as well. I'm doing my absolute best to be fully present and engaged with you and your listeners right now, because this is where my feet are. And I'm not thinking about my kids. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. I'm not worried about any of those things. Now, when we log off in a couple minutes and this conversation is over, now I'll shift gears and I'll focus on whatever the next most important thing is. And I won't be putting a lot of thought into the conversation we had. And it's being able to compartmentalize and move to the next most important thing is how we can perform at the highest level. And talk about a very basic concept, but I would say is arguably the most challenging thing to do, is to be in that present moment. And to me, that's how you define mental toughness. Mental toughness is the ability to focus on the next important thing, regardless of the chaos, the circumstances, the environment. No matter what's going on in the world, you're able to have hyper focus on what you're doing. And, as most people listening, there's people listening right now that are probably doing 3 or 4 things while they're listening. They're listening to something on the TV in the background. They're fixing their hair, their makeup, or
typing an email whilst listening.
And I'm not opposed to any of those things, but just know that you should do your best to put all of your attention into whatever you're doing at that moment. It doesn't mean you can't do a few things. I'm not saying you can't listen to this podcast and fold laundry, but you won't do either one to the level that you're capable of as if you were to split them. And I know that sounds a little over dramatic. I often fold laundry while I'm listening to podcasts, but just generally speaking, we want to put as much of our attention in that present moment as we can. And when we do, life will slow down. It will become simpler, and our performance will go through the roof.
Before we wrap up, where can our listeners find out more about yourself, get in contact with you if they want to, learn more or bring you into their own organizations to work with their senior leadership team? Where can they find you?
Awesome. Well, they can find everything they need at alansteinjr.com. And if you're interested in the book, you can go to raiseyourgamebook.com. And I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on LinkedIn and on all of the major social platforms. And I do love engaging with folks. I love talking about this stuff. So anyone that was listening either live or if you're listening to this as a recording, please feel free to drop me an email or hit me up on social. Would love to continue the discussion. And certainly if I could be of service in any way, would love to be able to help that as well. But thank you so much, Chris. I love everything that you represent and everything that you guys are doing. This has been a true pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, as always, guys, if you head over to hrdleaders.com after this, we will actually have this recording there. It will be on LinkedIn as well. But if you want the show notes, links to anything that we've been talking about, that'll be on our website at hrdleaders.com. You'll find a link to Alan's website, the book. Everything will be there to make your life easy. Apart from that, I'll let you all go and I'll see you again soon, Alan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.